Ein redaktioneller Hinweis: Dieses Gespräch wurde geführt, bevor Russland die Ukraine angegriffen hat.
Erstklassisch mit Mischke, der musikalische Podcast des Hamburger Abendblatts.
Schönen guten Tag zu einer neuen Folge. Ich habe heute einen sehr speziellen Gast dabei, nämlich einen Gast aus New York. Es ist der Chef der Metropolitan Opera, Peter Gelb. Er macht das Ganze seit 2006 und ist sowas wie der Lang unter den Opera Managers. Und wir sprechen jetzt heute über Zoom. Ich hoffe, die Leitung hält. Und erstmal, thank you, Peter Gelb, for being here. Thank you very much for having me. I'm really happy and excited to talk to you, and I have lots of questions to ask.
Well, I will try my best to answer them.
Okay. We start here. There's nearly no rules here, but there's one rule. We always start with either an easy or a tough question. What would you like first?
I don't care.
Okay. So the first then is the last time you've been to Hamburg State Opera, and why?
That's a very difficult question, actually, because I know I've been to the Hamburg Opera, but it's been years, and I honestly don't remember what I saw the last time I was in Hamburg. I apologize. It was many years ago.
Oh, so it wasn't that spectacular, I guess.
Unfortunately, having run the Met now for 16 years, I've seen so many performances here and abroad that not every one of them stands out. Hamburg Opera is obviously a very important company.
Of course.
And we have, the Met has a good relationship with its German audience. And certainly, I speak to German opera companies frequently. For some reason, I have not been, in recent years, had any contact with Hamburg Opera. But that doesn't mean it couldn't change in the future.
Okay, then the question I thought might be different is, what's your best way to treat a tenor who is in a foul mood?
To what a tenor? To treat a tenor who has a foul mood on a working day. Well, my policy is to be very sympathetic to performing artists because they are incredibly courageous creatures who have to deal with incredibly difficult circumstances. I mean, opera singers are really the great vocal athletes of our time. And particularly on the stage of a house the size of the Met, which is larger than probably any opera house in the world, the challenges are even more daunting. So I have only admiration for tenors and sopranos and other vocal type singers. I believe very much in my philosophy in dealing with artists my whole life is that the ends justify the means. Mm-hmm. And which means that, I don't mind a tenor in a foul mood as long as the tenor can sing well. And I am there, and my team at the Met is there to support tenors, whether they're in good moods or bad moods.
Okay. But let's get serious now. I just wondered, what was it like to close the world's largest opera house? You have about 3,800 seats in your house for more than a year, trying to survive, ordering all these severe cuts, and then opening up again. What was that like? I guess you'd never expected anything close to this to happen during your lifetime.
Well, certainly the entire pandemic has been a challenge greater than anything I've ever faced, and certainly I am not alone in the world in facing the unbelievable challenges and difficulties that have affected everyone in every walk of life. The Met, as you know, is very different from the German subsidized houses, subsidized by the state. We had no choice if the Met was going to survive, other than when we closed down, to also have to reduce our expenses dramatically. The government support in the U.S. Is equal to about 0.02% of our entire budget. So we have no government. We have very minimal government subsidies, a few $100,000 a year on average. And although we did receive one grant from the government late in the pandemic of $10 million, but our annual operating costs are $300 million a year. And there was no way we could, and 2/3 of those costs are the payments, the fees paid to all of our unions. The Met union employees, the orchestra, the chorus, the stagehands are all incredibly hardworking and very proud of what they do for the Met. And I'm very proud of their work. You know, I think it's fair to say that the Met's orchestra and chorus are amongst the greatest in the world. But when we had to close down, we had to furlough many of them. And this was very difficult for the members of the company. We would not have survived if we hadn't cut our expenses in that way. Do
you think that the damages are so severe that they are beyond repairable, or is there a way back to normal?
Well, first of all, we're not in a normal world right now. There is no normal. The new normal is very abnormal. But I can tell you this, that since the Met came back together and rehearsals began for the chorus in August and for the orchestra at the end of August and September, we have started performing. We've put on, many, many performances, and we've already opened 9 or 10 different operas. Certainly, I would be wrong to say that there are not some hard memories of the people who suffered through the pandemic without pay. Although we were, trying our best to support them with healthcare and other ways. And then ultimately, for the months before we reopened, with partial payments of their fees. But I think what happens at the Met, and this could be true of other companies as well, is that once people started working together again, that became the first and foremost important thing in their minds. Everyone is working really hard at the Met, and I think the rapport between the orchestra and the chorus and our wonderful music director, Unique again, is as powerful and positive as ever. And they're delivering great performances every night. So I think that you could say that there may be, some residual negative feelings, but I think overall the attitude of everyone working inside the company is one of proudly producing great performances.
But what's the mood of the art scene in New York in general? I mean, you mentioned it, federal and state governments, they try to help artists financially, and in the US, arts were generally lost. They were on their own. And what's it like to live with that kind of pressure now? And what's the mood? How do your colleagues feel in other theaters? Is there general perception of we're getting back on our feet again somehow, or is there just fear and anxiety and nobody really knows what to do?
Well, I mean, the fact is we are on our feet. We're performing, and unlike German houses, which are either half empty or 1/4 full, we actually have full capacity in the Met right now, and we are and there are performances that are selling out with all of our seats full. With very strict mask mandates. One of the differences, I think, between the Met and some of the German and Austrian companies is that we, from the very beginning, felt the only way back was to secure the safety and health of the company in the most rigorous fashion. So we have an absolute mandatory vaccination policy. Nobody is allowed inside the Opera House, whether they be an employee or an audience member, without being fully vaccinated. And yesterday we announced a booster mandate as well, which goes into effect next month. So, and we have very rigorous testing policy or procedure in place that we're conducting together with Mount Sinai Hospital. So because of that, the company members and the audience members feel safer inside the Met than perhaps in most places in New York City. So there's a feeling of optimism, I think, on the part of the company that they can continue to perform and that audiences can come. However, with the rise of the new variants, we don't know what will happen. So that certainly is a cause of concern, and there is some. I think until the new variant is until the information about the new variant is revealed fully, and people understand exactly what it means to their lives, there will always be uncertainty, and then there will be a next variant. However, the one thing we need to know is that, ultimately we have to find a way to live in this world with COVID, because it's not going away, and that is the sole source of anxiety and depression in New York City right now, as it is in most parts of the world.
Mm. Do you now more than ever envy your European colleagues, and especially your German colleagues, because they don't play one piece for weeks? They change the menu all the time. They're supported by the state. That's heaven in a way.
Well, I certainly admire my German colleagues, but I wouldn't want to trade places with them. I'm very happy running the Metropolitan Opera, which I think is one of the greatest theaters in the world. And, I think that we actually are, I think the energy and excitement around the Met right now is very high particularly because of the new work that we're emphasizing at the Met. When I first came to the Met 16 years ago, I was faced with a very conservative audience, and it was a slow build to be able to emphasize more and more new productions and new work. Right now, this season at the Met, we're actually presenting premieres of 3 contemporary pieces, 2 of which were commissioned or partly commissioned by the Met. Fire Shut Up in My Bones, which opened our season, the first opera by a Black composer to be presented at the Met, the composer Terence Blanchard, which was a huge success and sold out its performances, and brought a new diverse audience to the Met and made the Met really part of the mainstream cultural conversation in New York City in a way that it has never really achieved before. Also, just now, tonight we're ending the run of brilliant new work by a genius young composer who's only 31 years old, Matthew O'Coin, his work Eurydice, which was a spectacular success, I could say. And later in the season, we're presenting Brett Dean's Hamlet, which I saw about 5 or 6 years ago in Limebourne and immediately decided to bring to the Met. Mm. And we're also presenting the first Don Carlos ever in French at the Met. Of course, that's not in the same category, it's different. But the point is that right now this weekend we're opening an English language family friendly production of Massenet Cendrillon, which we, of course, in English we're calling Cinderella, which is 90 minutes long in its abridged version that we're presenting, and in a charming production by the French director Laurent Pelly. With a top cast. When we do family entertainment, whether it's our English language Magic Flute that's playing right now, which includes Rolando Villazon as Papageno, which is a huge hit with the audiences, and or whether it's this new Magic Flute, we don't dumb down the casting. We cast as if we're putting on an adult opera on the highest possible casting level. So we have Isabel Leonard in the role of Cinderella. Emily D'Angelo is one of the rising star mezzo-sopranos in the role of Prince Charming. We are engaged in making opera more accessible and more available to more people, and this is making the Met a much more exciting and interesting cultural institution, and the people who are inside the company feel that. They're very excited by that. They like the fact that people are coming to the Met and enjoying these and having these new experiences.
Yeah. Since you mentioned Terence Blanchard's opera Fire Shut Up in My Bones, that's the first opera of the first African-American composer since the opening of the Met about 140 years ago. And you put Gershwin's Porgy and Bess on the menu, and so this great subject of Black Lives Matter and wokeness and diversity. Does this also help at the box office? Are the people that have been complaining about an opera house being so white, so middle-aged, so centered on Europe traditions. Do they also buy tickets, or is this still a hard thing to sell to them?
Well, as I mentioned a moment ago, the Fire Shut Up My Bones sold out. So the answer is quite obvious. It attracted a new audience. I would say 16 years ago, it might not have been possible for me to put on programs like this. Although when I first arrived at the Met, one of the first composers I contacted was Wynton Marsalis, who I had worked with on many projects in my days at Sony and before I came to the Met, and who I asked to write an opera, and he's still thinking about it. But so the idea of having a Black composer write an opera is certainly not a novel one, but it was the first time a Black composer's work was performed at the Met, in the case of Terence Blanchard's opera. And I do not believe in wokeness for the sake of wokeness. I believe in great art. And certainly, though, if Black Lives Matter and changes in society give us the flexibility to broaden our programming, I'm all for it. I just don't believe in jumping through wokeness hoops as a standalone exercise.
So is the Met going to be able to pick a white singer for an Aida or for an Othello? Or do you think you might even be forced somehow to always take the colored singer for roles like this in the future? Because otherwise everybody's going to get insane in minutes.
No, I think that we will cast the best singers for that are available for the roles, and we're relatively colorblind in our casting. What we did do about 4 or 5, maybe 6 or 7 years ago is we stopped using racial makeup. We don't, if we cast a white tenor to sing Othello, we're not going to put darken his skin. And that's something that we put into place some years ago. And I think that's right. I think that's I think that's the right decision to make. The thing about the Met also is that there are very few singers who, because the Met is so big, the space, it is harder to cast at the Met than in smaller sized European houses. The available number of top singers for certain parts, like Othello, is very limited. Our audiences are used to hearing the best voices in the world, and we're not going to compromise that. Fortunately, there are a number of terrific African American and other Black singers who we do cast at the Met, and who also sing at European houses. One of the breakout successes this season was Ryan Speedo Green, who is a member of the Vienna Opera Ensemble and who has sung several different roles on the stage of the Met. He had strong supporting roles in both Fire Shut Up My Bones and Porgy and Bess, and will be singing more standard repertoire in the future.
I mean,
and certainly singers like Latonia Moore or Angel Blue are of the highest quality and can and will sing Aida and sing other Verdi roles too.
I mean, you have to think commercial, and the Met has to offer all the big names all the time. How do you plan a season when you have this pressure in your neck that people are always demanding the same stars or known names for their money, and nobody seems to have the patience anymore to wait for someone to build up a career, to build up a repertoire, to just get into the tracks and take the time it needs?
Well, the thing is, it's difficult for a singer to arrive fully formed on the stage of the Met. They have to develop, somewhere. But it's not to say that we haven't. We have. My philosophy in casting is to bring singers along. We don't, even though scheduling of major roles is sometimes done as far in advance as 4 or 5 seasons. or because of that, if we believe in a young singer, we will cast them in multiple roles over a series of years and see them develop. I mean, you know, the classic example of that is Anna Netrebko, who, when she first came to the Met, obviously was unknown. And she had already made her debut before I got there. She sung in War and Peace when it was under Gergiev in, I think, in 2005. When I became the head of the Met in 2006, I knew it was pretty obvious that she was a brilliant young talent. And I made a point of meeting her and signing her for 2 operas a season for every season going forward, and watched her along with the audience grow and develop into this amazing dramatic soprano. You know, but she, early on in her career, she was singing soubrette, you know, roles like, you know, in Elysir and lighter roles that fit her early career voice as a coloratura soprano, really.
Mm. You don't have to mention any names, but what were the weirdest ideas or wishes you've heard from singers? Like, I just want the green M&Ms, or I don't want a temperature higher than, I don't know, whatever. I need this driver to bring me. Are there any ideas where you have thought that, are you out of your mind? I mean, you're singing great, but this is insane. Is there any example you can give without giving any names?
I really don't think the singers who perform at the Met seem to be fairly rational these days. So okay. I can't say that anyone is asking for any special colored M&Ms. I mean, you know, I've had experiences in my career with some very eccentric artists with some very eccentric demands. Probably the most notable of which was Vladimir Horowitz, the pianist who I managed for the last 9 years of his life. But you know, who insisted on being fed Dover sole every night. So but I think most singers understand that at the Met they have to work within well, that's a question of behaving. I mean, they have to behave. They have to focus on achieving greatness in their performances, and most of them are singularly focused on that. And you know, when we, you know, as I said earlier, you know, we believe in supporting our artists, so you know, we want to make them comfortable and certainly, you know, making their dressing rooms warm and their costumes comfortable, and are all part of the job of making an opera, of supporting an opera singer.
Mm. You've announced a new ring cycle for 2025. Your last ring was directed by Robert Lepage in 2010, and with a giant stage machine called the Beast, costing about 60 million.
It wasn't called the Beast. Maybe you called it the Beast.
Yeah, but the official nickname.
It was referred affectionately to as the Machine.
Okay, but as far as I know, the official nickname was the Beast. But
not as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, but it cost about $60 million, as far as I know, and was
that's completely inaccurate information.
Okay,
you know, there's a lot of information that circulates on music blogs and other sites that are uninformed and don't ever seem to wish to be correctly informed. So I will tell you that the ring cycle at the Met cost probably somewhere around $10 to $12 million, and that was for 4 operas. So it's really was not much more than the average cost of a new production at the Met per opera.
But the productions or the ring cycle itself was tricky, to say the least. And now you're doing the next one with another director, another team. What did you learn? What's your lesson from the last adventurous experience with the last ring?
Well, you know, the thing about the ring cycle is that the ring cycle is typically very much connected to the regime of a music director. And it's perfectly natural to create a new ring cycle for our new music director, Unique Nezesigan. Right now, I think just about every house in Europe or every major house is planning a new ring cycle. Paris is planning a new ring cycle. Both houses in Berlin, one is already doing one. Covent Garden is planning a new ring cycle. So, the idea of doing a new ring cycle is not a shocking or scandalous conception. And it is something that is exciting and stimulating, both for the performers in the house and most importantly for the audience that gets to experience it. What I learned from the Lepage ring cycle, which I believe was visually spectacular. It was very challenging, but to put on, because it was technically so complicated and so ahead of its time in a way, in terms of the technical demands it put on the theater. The challenge, even though the Met is a very large opera house with great technical capability, it is a repertory house. So perhaps what I learned in retrospect is that the Lepage ring cycle was bigger and bolder than perhaps the Met could handle. But if I knew what I knew now, I probably wouldn't have done it. And I would then we would have missed out on something that was an extraordinary experience for the company and for audiences. Not everyone, I know the many of the critics hated this ring, but I don't produce opera for critics. I produce opera for audiences, and the majority of the audience like this ring, and so that's it may be different in Germany. Maybe German intendants think that the critics are more important than the audience. I feel the other way around.
Personally, I enjoyed this ring, but mostly mostly because I'm crazy about Brent Tervel. He can do anything, sing the telephone book, whatever. As long as he's on the stage, I'm satisfied. So
he was great, and the whole cast was great.
Yeah. You started, changing the topic somehow, you started this Met Cinema program in 2006. And this, I think, was in the beginning maybe an expensive and maybe just a minor side business. Then the years went by, Corona came, everybody streamed, hardly anybody earned anything. And now you're streaming again to cinemas. Is this really lucrative now, or is this just another sort of commercial for your opera house?
Well, when we began the experiment of live transmissions into cinemas in 2006, in my first season, it was meant to be primarily a way of connecting the Met to a global audience. And it was, the business model for it was that it would not add burden to our finances. It was meant to break even. And it was wildly commercially successful after a couple of years. We starting within a year or two of its inception, it really caught on beyond what I had ever hoped for. So it became not only a marketing and artistic extension of the Met, it also was profitable for the Met. And in a way replaced, and it was very meaningful for in many different ways. It helped us improve our or secure the best casting, because in the void of a declining record industry, the ability to be, or the possibility of being singing on the stage of the Met and being seen live by 250,000 or so or more people in cinemas around the world was the equivalent of what the record industry used to be able to deliver for opera recordings, and no longer can. Today, a new opera recording might sell 5,000 or 10,000 copies. So, because of that, because of the success of the HD programs, initially, I found myself, trying to persuade singers that this was a good idea. Later on, it was a question of assuaging the hurt feelings of singers who weren't included, because every singer who comes to the Met wants to be in one of these programs, because it's the equivalent of having what used to be the equivalent of what used to be having a very lucrative recording contract. Now an artist who sings, even artists who don't sing on the stage at the Met that often anymore. Like someone like Jonas Kaufman, for example, who I wish would come to the Met more often, credits his performances in HD programs at the beginning of his career as sort of lifting his reputation and around the world. So it's been very helpful in terms of casting. It's been very helpful in terms of raising the Met's brand to a global audience. It has helped our ticket sales because 20% of our ticket sales, and of course at the moment everything is different with the pandemic, but 20% of our audience is foreign, and 70% of the people watching the Met in movie theaters are outside the United States. So more people know about the Met because of the HD programs, and when they come to New York, they want to see the Met the same way they want to go to Broadway. So the HD programs have helped us in innumerable ways. The difficulty, of course, now is that people are frightened to go to the movie theaters. So for the time being, we're continuing to transmit these programs into movie theaters. I shouldn't say for the time being. We're continuing to transmit them, but for the time being, we don't have the audience we had before.
Yeah.
So we have to hope that will change.
But I mean, speaking for myself, I find it really hard liking this format. To me, it always seems like a sort of consolation prize. It's never as nice and as near and close and exciting as being in an opera house. And I find it hard to concentrate. I find it hard to watch an opera performance on a cinema screen, and even more so at home being streamed. Right. What's your experience? Are you really able to enjoy this when you're streaming at home? That's something different than being in a cinema.
First of all, streaming at home is different because one of the reasons why the Met Live in HD program was so successful is because it was being viewed primarily on giant screens, which is a suitable counterpart to to complement to grand opera performances. Obviously, the experience also from a technical point of view varies according to the quality of the projectors and audio systems in the movie theaters that you're sitting in. Fortunately, your opinion is in the minority because the vast majority
the problem of my life.
You're entitled to your opinion, of course. But before the pandemic, on a typical Saturday night, we were transmitting these programs live, and which is what part of the reason why the key formula to our success was the live aspect of our transmissions, because there's no question it's better to be in the opera house. I've never suggested anything other than that. But the primary director of our programs, Gary Halverson, is, in my opinion, is the greatest director of live cinema transmissions. And for an audience that is interested in these productions who can't be at the Met, to be able to see them on a large screen and to see the very brilliant camera work, which includes close-ups of the singers as well as contextual shots of the whole scenery, works for hundreds of thousands of people who enjoy it. I think that is not as impressive on a small screen, certainly. I am producing these programs, so I am sitting in the truck next to the director, watching it all happen. So I early on, when we first started doing these programs, I would go and look at them afterwards in a movie theater to see what they look like. But I have a different experience personally, which is being in the control room, sort of in the center of the event taking place.
Disney Plus just shot its Star Wars show, The Mandalorian, virtually in a thing called the Dome. ABBA just created their avatars for their shows in London. Esa-Pekka Salonen made experiments with virtual opera. How many years are left for actual stage performances, for sets and shows on stage, live people doing live things? When will everybody be watching music performances with AR glasses? Any elevated guesses on your side?
Well, I can only give you my hope, which is that there is never such a thing as a metaverse opera house. Mm-hmm. I think that technology is advances, and I think technology should be harnessed artistically whenever possible. And certainly when it comes to making movies, which are canned to begin with, the greatest technology improvements in the proper artistic hands make sense. Mm. But I don't see. I don't think it's hard to imagine an opera experience that is in a virtual world that would be very satisfying. At least not to me.
Mm. What's the best opera to get someone into opera? If you have someone who's saying to you, I've never been there, I just want to try it, what's the best way to start? I mean, people over here always think that Magic Flute is the best and the easiest way to start enjoying opera, which I find quite weird because there's hardly any opera more complicated to my mind than this one.
You know, it's interesting, actually. The English language Magic Flute that we're putting on right now, which is just about 100 minutes long, is far more satisfying for some of our audience members than the full-length German version. Okay. For that very reason, it's simplified, but in a way that is still stimulating and appealing. You know, I can't tell you what the best introductory opera experience is. I mean, it really depends on how it's on the production and the singers and what might, you know, when my oldest son, who is a filmmaker, was 5 years old, he watched the entire Ring cycle at the Met. So
that's the best way to start.
And he thought that was the best introduction he could possibly have.
Yeah. I always send people into Janacek operas if possible, because you don't understand anything anyway, and the music is so wonderful and it's dramatic, and that's one thing to start, I guess. But
I mean, I think this opera that we just put on, Eurydice, is a great way to experience opera, or Fire Shut Up My Bones. I think, in a way, you know, for modern audiences who have no prior experience, seeing an opera that actually is socially or societally relevant to them, or that explores themes in a modern way that they can relate to, might be the best way to be introduced to opera of all.
Mm. Since your opera is so dependent on fundraising, what is the best method to convince rich people to spend money in your art form? Just not asking, just by saying, you're lucky if we take your money. How do you convince people to give money?
Well, if I were to say you're lucky that we take your money, I wouldn't be able to raise any money. Mm-hmm. So that's not a good approach. The supporters of the Met are very happy to be associated with the Met. They like, and you know, what stimulates them, and I speak in a broad, generalized way, is the success of the Met. The fact that the Met is right now, for example, it has returned successfully and is connected to is presenting such interesting work, makes them feel happy to be associated with it and to support it. You know, during the shutdown, when we were closed for 18 months, we were streaming from our library of content a different opera every night for free. And during that period of time, we actually gained 38,000 new donors who were so appreciative of the fact that the Met, even though it was at home on a small screen or a large screen, if people had a large screen at home, they appreciated the fact that the Met was thinking about them and was offering this experience on a nightly basis. Mm. So, you know, I think the donors of the Met, people give money when they believe in something. So I think the people who support the Met believe in the Met's place and purpose in trying to add some luster to life and some meaning, making a meaningful contribution to a civilized world.
Hmm. You've already mentioned him, but you used to be the manager of Vladimir Horowitz for his last 9 years. Did you actually see him perform here in Hamburg when he did his last concert? Was this during your time already?
Yes, in fact, I was there with him.
Okay, what was that like?
That was an extraordinary experience because he, also you have to forgive me. I don't know how long this conversation is going to go on for, but I've got to end it shortly. Not because I don't like you, not because I don't like talking to you or your questions or hearing your questions, but because I have to go and attend to the Met in a few minutes. But the managing Horowitz was extraordinary because he was uniquely popular. It was possible to arrange his concerts literally on a few weeks' notice. And also, it was the only way that he and I could work together because he never knew how he was going to feel in advance. So he didn't like to plan far ahead. So the concert in Hamburg and Berlin that took place right after his historic return to Moscow and what was still Leningrad in 1986 were results of he was so initially very nervous about going back to Russia, which he had not returned since he had left in 1926 or something. And he was so excited with his success in Russia. If you recall, his concert in Moscow, which I produced, was for television, was broadcast all over the world, including by ZDF in Germany. And so he decided, but he wanted to keep it going. Basically, he didn't want to just go home to America. That was the original plan. So he'd go to Russia and then return. So he wanted to. He was on this incredible cloud of success and happiness after the concerts in Russia. So he and at that time, Elmar Weingarten, who was a German producer who'd been working for in Berlin, came to Russia and kept inviting Horowitz to perform in Berlin and Hamburg, and he was very persistent, and Horowitz wanted to keep performing. So Horowitz decided that the rationale, I guess, was that he was recreating his initial exit from Russia in 1926, where he went to Hamburg and played there. So it was like kind of a historic look back at his throwback to the origins of his career, that he would once again leave Russia and go to Germany. Yeah, and those concerts he played in Hamburg and Berlin were incredible successes. And I remember actually being with him in. I think it was maybe at the Hamburg Opera that he went to a performance before his concert, and the audience recognized him and stood up and gave him a standing ovation, even though he was just a spectator at a performance at the Hamburg Opera. Okay. The final question. A famous Social Democrat politician here in Germany once said that being chief of the Social Democrats in Germany is the best job apart from being Pope. How do you rank your job in this perspective then? I rank my job, certainly, it was the job that I dreamed about having for most of my professional life. I grew up in New York City. As a teenager, I worked as an usher at the Met. I considered it to be, throughout my professional career, I considered the Metropolitan Opera to be the pinnacle of the performing arts. And to run this company was something that I dreamed about. And certainly it's the hardest thing I've ever done. But I wouldn't change choices. I mean, I'm glad that I took the job, and I'm still glad that I'm doing it. And I have a contract that actually runs until 2026 or 27. So I will be around for a while. Yeah. We couldn't end any better way. Thank you very much for having me. It's been fun talking to you. It's been very interesting. Thank you. And I'm trying to improve my technique of being able to watch an opera performance in a cinema, or even maybe on a flat screen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Enjoy your time and stay safe. Bye then.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Weitere Podcasts vom Hamburger Abendblatt finden Sie auf abendblatt.de/podcast.